Welcome back to the Kyber Collective. I'm one of your three hosts, Flowers. I'm joined by Sig.
Hey.
And Annie.
Yo.
Today, we're tackling Empire Strikes Back. I have done a little book report, just like Sig did in the episode previous about A New Hope. And I have read and pulled some things from the Making of Star Wars Empire Strikes Back book and some movie things. So I'm just going to get right into it. One of the things that I learned about the making of this movie, apart from just how much thought and how much time and how much effort goes into it, is what happens before the movie gets made. And this bit I had no clue about. So when they finished filming A New Hope, they had all of this equipment lying around that they couldn't use because, a Star Wars movie was not being made. So what did they do? They rented this equipment out, and the people who rented it created a little show called Battlestar Galactica. Dun, dun, dun. Now, this might not seem like very important stuff, but this was apparently a huge thing when Empire Strikes Back was in production, when it was in development, I should say, because Galactica is what it originally was called. Galactica, Saga of a Star World, was basically, as George Lucas describes it, a ripoff. And he was very displeased because one of the first things that Galactica was doing was having a snow planet and a whole plot on this. And he was like, yo, that's not cool. You're using our equipment. You're calling this Saga of a Star World, and you're on a snow planet. And I found this fascinating. I found it fascinating that there's all this stuff happening behind the scenes, and the people who were working on this had worked on A New Hope already. And this tied into George having this frustration of like, well, this is kind of annihilating my chance of doing a TV series with Star Wars. And this is going back to because now they filled this void of a space kind of fantasy.
Right.
Yeah, and marketing it as George Lucas's idea.
So, I have not seen the original Battlestar Galactica. I've seen the new one. I don't know how close the two are. I have the impression that they're relatively different shows, actually. So is the plot of the original Battlestar Galactica then actually quite close to what George Lucas was thinking for an episode?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was very, very close enough that George Lucas the company he worked with was 20th Century Fox, and they sued MCA, Universal, and ABC for copyright infringement of Star Wars.
Okay, wow, yeah.
Yeah. And everyone who was part of the Battlestar Galactica team knew that it was a Star Wars ripoff. And the way that they were fixing it was like, okay, we won't call it this title, we'll call it Battlestar Galactica. And we won't have this, we'll just do this. But they had like, I think George said they had like stormtroopers. They had like their character names were also, it was like Lucas Cylon was one of them, something close to that. Like even the character names were derivatives.
This is Princess Lena.
It was basically what it was.
Loner. He's a space pirate.
Yeah, Loner.
They had all of those elements, so I thought that was so fascinating. And I don't have a question for it mostly, but my impression of this was, because this was such a new concept. You had Star Trek, obviously, that was a space exploration, but the concept that George Lucas brought was very novel for its time. And you were having, opportunities were starting to rise of how can we bank on something similar to this? And inevitably, this had as well. So among the things, the facts and tidbits that I've discovered reading this book about Empire Strikes Back, one of the most hilarious ones, they created a concept of a teacher who would teach Luke the ways of the Force. You would think of him to be Yoda, but originally he was called Bundin Debonin, aka Buffy.
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 So good old Buffy was going to teach Luke the ways of the Force.
Wait, say the first part again. Bunyan? Bundin?
No, it was Bundin. Debonin.
Bundin. Debonin.
Master Bundin Debonin. He was it was described as a little minch, a troll with webbed feet. The initial concept that they had for Yoda was this very tall, 16 foot tall, like,
God.
crazy guy. And then they were like, no, we need to have someone who's who's smaller and old and wizened and
The 16-foot Yoda is going to haunt my nightmares. I just, oh my
Yeah,
God.
I can't think of anything creepier, quite honestly. That's
Especially,
wow.
yeah.
Especially if he had the same voice, but it's like booming and it comes from like the treetops, and he's like, "Teacher, I am." It's like, oh my God.
That would have scared not just Luke, but everybody if we got to see this.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they revised this.
Thank you.
He scaled down. I wish there was a way that we could see art through a podcast, because the concept art for Yoda was very, very, it was also funny, but also interesting how things go through so many rounds of development that they finally settle on what something should look like.
Yeah.
When they started filming Empire Strikes Back, the first thing they did was go film the Hoth scenes, and that was filmed in Norway. And immediately when they got there, there was not only like this insane blizzard, but they had 3 avalanches the day they were supposed to film. And it was so sad reading how they were trying to, and their equipment was also of the time, so they couldn't use their cameras for more than 4 minutes at a time before they froze. It was a living nightmare. They called,
Wow.
and because the conditions were so bad, this one I felt so terrible for. They called Harrison Ford, who was in London at the time, and was like, we're going to call you up here early. You're going to come here now, please. And so he got there. It was already blizzarding. He needed to drive a snowmobile in the dead of night at midnight. Got there, and then at 7 a.m. was filming a scene. This is all within like 24 hours. But the most charming bit is like he wasn't upset about it. He was like, yeah. So this is how we're doing it, huh?
Yeah. That's the vibe I get off him really strong. Because didn't he have like diphtheria or something when filming Indiana Jones? And he was like, yeah, fine, whatever.
Right? Like they all just
sounds like him.
Yeah.
With that knowledge of all the background information that we have of this movie, what was your first impression when you watched Empire Strikes Back?
My first impression, I honestly, first time I watched it, I was 3-4 years old. I think when I was that young, they all just kind of blended into each other. My brother always loved The Empire Strikes Back the most, and I remember that. It was definitely the favorite of most people, so I think I definitely paid more attention to it than others, probably. Also, it's just iconic. Like, it's the one where Luke loses his hand. He learns that Darth Vader is his dad. He meets Yoda. There's just all of these, crazy things that happen to him in this movie. Just, surprises, I don't know what it must have been like, in, what was it, 1980 something. I don't know what it must have been like sitting in that theater and, hearing Luke, I am your father.
Oh, man.
What must that have been like? I've never not known that. I just mean, I've just never not known that.
Yeah, it is weird to think of it as, an iconic reveal. It's one of those things that's, you sort of grow up and you know, that Vader is Luke's father, that Rosebud is the sled, and that What's-His-Face is dead in The Sixth Sense. I've just spoiled all those movies if you've managed to avoid that. Yeah. I feel like the future one is that Snape kills Dumbledore is, just going to be known before you even read the Harry Potter series. It is weird to think of it as actually being a massive reveal.
Yeah. What about you, Sig? What was your first impression?
My first impression is that it's a much darker film, but it's got things that interest me more in it. Like the entire confronting yourself sequence that happens on Dagobah, the going into the cave and the mystical delving into the Force and Yoda's lessons about the Force. And the mistake of doing what would otherwise clearly be the right thing, of choosing to go and rescue your friends, which I think most decent people would think is a good and correct thing to do and a loyal thing to do, but actually finding out that itself is a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And people, I feel like people still think that he did the right thing. I guess he kind of did the right thing, but
Well, it's interesting because part of the theme that I found in this movie was failure in some. I mean, honestly, the things that they endeavored to do in this movie ultimately failed.
Yeah.
And it was on Luke's part, it was because he was acting first as Luke rather than centering himself in the mindset of looking at the bigger picture. And because he couldn't do that, because he went and tried to rescue them, I mean, he literally lost a piece of himself to it.
Yeah, he wasn't thinking with the pragmatism of the Jedi. He was being his rash self, and I guess he had to go through that.
And more than that, I mean, it's literally a trap that he walks into, but a trap that's designed for him. And I suppose I find it really interesting that the kind of prequels ethos of Obi-Wan is, oh, it's a trap, spring the trap.
Spring the trap. Yeah.
Which doesn't work in this case.
No, he wasn't ready yet.
Yeah, but he wasn't ready, and he's also not acting. He's reacting rather than acting. He's being led by someone else rather than so it's not the final confrontation because it's him being drawn in instead of him preparing and going to. And I love the weird cave sequence where he enters the underworld, or however you want to call it, when he has the face is Vader and his own face is inside, as a kind of symbol for not only the reveal that's coming about Vader being his father, but about his own potential to fail, to fall to the dark side, and to be drawn into the trap that's being set about him. And what I think is almost most interesting is I don't think it's until Return of the Jedi that we understand even what the trap is, which is why maybe it's really easy to think in that movie that he did the right thing by going to rescue his friends. And it's not even necessarily that I think he didn't, because I do think his friends are important. But it's that he was allowed himself to be led by specifically the dark side into doing something that was not
knowingly he did it. Yeah, because you had Ben and Yoda say to him, "Don't go." Basically, you're playing into his hands. You had Leia scream to him, "It's a trap! It's a trap!" What I find most fascinating about that confrontation with Vader is not at all serious about that little duel they had.
Yeah,
he was not. He was just kind of playing with them. He was using one hand. He was going like, good, very good. Obi-Wan has, trained you well, so and so. It kind of like testing him. And over, Luke kind of fails and Vader lets him get away. He fails, gets away. And what I noticed on my watch through just recently was it isn't until Luke strikes him on the arm that Vader takes, that next step is when he takes Luke's hand off. It's like, oh, you're going to play now. Well, you just lost a hand.
Yeah.
But then he also gets Father of the Year for being like, by the way, I'm your dad. If you join me now, I mean, I'm sorry about the hand, but...
The real reason both Obi-Wan and Yoda were like, don't go, is they're like, God, Anakin has no tact. He will, however he delivers this news, it's going to be a fucking
awful. He's going to spring it on him like he did everything else in his lifetime. And that's what happens. But I'm curious, in this vein of Luke disregarding, his training and going off with this emotional instinct. This is kind of the first time we see more discussion on the Force. And I would argue it's not even about the Force, because Luke has to learn to use the Force, right? But he's really learning to be a Jedi. He's learning the thought of the Jedi, and his inability to use the Force correctly had been because he was not disciplining his mind the way a Jedi needed to, the most serious mind, as Yoda says. What is something that you really enjoyed about the journey of Luke going through training with the Force in Empire?
I like the idea that your inhibitions are shaped by what you believe you could accomplish. So like the lifting of the X-Wing, that I suppose if you think about it theoretically, if you're using, it's unclear specifically how the Force works, but it seems like there isn't a limit on how heavy something can be before you lift it. I mean, especially in the sequels, because we see Rey lifting an entire spaceship or pulling an entire spaceship. But the idea that it's because it looks big, you ascribe the weight that it would have to it. And it's about overcoming the kind of mental barrier about your idea of how heavy this is in order to really lift it, is something that I really enjoy about the Force, is that instead of it being an external battle, you versus the X-Wing, is actually you versus yourself. And that seems to be the bulk of what we see when people are learning to use the Force. And Luke having to have the visor on at the very beginning with the little training robot to stop looking and start looking inward to be able to use it. And again, here with Yoda basically asking him to forget how big the X-Wing is and just lift it is the kind of bit that I think I enjoy the most about the training session. Also, Yoda being a backpack. Yoda being a backpack is the highlight of the film.
Yoda being a backpack is an iconic scenario. But I really enjoy your point there, because it is your own belief that hinders you, because when Yoda lifts the X-Wing out, or the ship, Luke's first words are, "I don't believe it." And Yoda responds, "And that is why you fail." What about you, Annie?
That's just something that people say. And then Yoda had to stand there like all disappointed, of course. Yoda's disappointment face. Oh my gosh, it's the stuff of nightmares. He's just always so disappointed in Luke. That is why you fail. I'm sorry. Yoda is not my favorite.
No, yes, let's be clear about that. I'm ambivalent about Yoda, because I find that when you're at that stage and you've seen what you've seen, you're just kind of like, you've lost your patience at that point. And I feel like his patience with Luke's, I guess, unwillingness to see outside of himself and his ability can be frustrating.
Yeah, no, he was being a spoiled brat. He definitely was.
Yeah.
He was like, "I can't do it. You asked the impossible." He was being like peak
So
Luke wanting to
downtrodden.
going to the Tashi station, except for like in reverse. It's just like, But and I know that Yoda's frustrated. But like, I'm glad that he actually did the thing, that he pulled that thing out of the swamp. He kind of stopped speaking in riddles for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
What would you say was your, I guess, what you enjoyed about seeing the training and the learning the ways of the Jedi?
It was very similar to Sig's in that it's really all about belief in yourself. I think that is a great lesson for every kid that was watching that movie, that you can be like some huge dork like Luke Skywalker, and as long as you believe in yourself, you can do whatever you want. I mean, that's basically like the message,
This actually ties into my final question, which was going to be, what would you say is the most important lesson learned in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, that you, whoever you are somebody, and if you believe in yourself, you can do whatever, you can do anything. And I mean, like, not, like anything, like you can literally lift a starship out of a swamp, but, it's more like a metaphor. And then also, like, if some evil Sith Lord is sending you visions, don't necessarily go out and enter his trap. It's good advice.
I feel like also if someone says so-and-so killed your father, ask for proof.
Yeah. That's a good one. Don't believe the shit that adults tell you all the time.
Especially if they're weird wizards who come back as ghosts.
Yes.
Yeah, I would be highly suspect.
Yeah, I'm with Annie completely about what the kind of takeaways from this are. I think the training, the Jedi training, and then Luke's eventual choice and his fight with Vader, for me, are the moments of the film that I guess carry the messages. And it is about looking inward and about being thoughtful about how you approach things. And a part of me wonders, Obi-Wan and Anakin are disasters in the prequels. I need to preface the statement by saying I do not endorse their behavior. I think that they're walking disasters. But I do wonder if Obi-Wan might be an example of a more Jedi way of approaching a trap, and that you can still go in knowing that it's a trap, but you have to do so thoughtfully. And Luke's ultimate mistake is in doing so blindly and being blindsided by the information that he didn't have, which admittedly the two people telling him not to go did have, and I do think they dropped the ball. But an element of looking before you leap and thinking about what you do and not reacting out of anger or vengeance seems to be quite central.
I would agree with that completely. It was Luke's, I don't want to say inability, but his lack of training in being able to control his emotions, therefore controlling his judgment, or at least influencing his judgment. Because, like you said, Obi-Wan and Anakin, have acted on impulse judgments, but they're able to get through it because they have the discipline.
It's a very bold word to throw in Anakin's direction.
We've seen enough of the Clone Wars to know he is able to pull himself together when necessary. It's not an easy word that comes by him. And he is someone, that's a whole can of worms itself on Anakin and being able to have self-control. But Luke, definitely, his successes and his qualities in A New Hope became his foils in Empire Strikes Back. And it definitely pulled him down and pulled the rebellion movement into a different direction, because they, Han Solo got frozen in carbonite. Leia is on the run. Luke had that confrontation with Vader and ultimately failed. He lost his hand. He needed rescuing. You don't know the certainty of what's going to happen next. So it is a movie where you that high is just kind of pulled down from A New Hope, and it's like, okay, now you're at the lowest point. What are you going to do next?
As soon as you said that, it made me think that, like, basically Luke's training in the Force is literally all of us learning anything, because at the end of the first movie, he's learned a little bit, and he's like, yeah, I'm so good at this. Watch, I 100% know how to do this. Yeah. And then the next movie is him realizing how much he doesn't know and completely failing at it. And I'm like, I've tried to learn a second language. You learn how to say hello and ask to order food and stuff, and you think you're a fucking wizard, and then you get into passive tense and all sorts of subjunctives, and you're like, I just don't know anything, chop my hand off and let me die. Like, him falling off at the end and waiting for death is very relatable. Like, it just
who hasn't been there?
Yeah. And then finally in Return of the Jedi he can speak French.
I also found it fascinating that he was in such hard denial of Vader being his father. He yeeted himself off that tower. 5 minutes later, you have Vader force communicating with him, going like, Luke. And Luke is like, Father. The acceptance there was instantaneous. It's like, oh, yes, so you accept
he searched his feelings.
Come
he
to
knew
Papa.
It to be true.
He did search his... Yeah. He did know it to be true. Do we have any final resounding thoughts on Empire Strikes Back before we jump to our most anticipated lightning round questions?
Yeah, I want to say something that Luke didn't believe it because Obi-Wan told him that Darth Vader killed his father. He knew that his dad was dead. Like, he knew that for a fact. He was lied to. I'm sorry. It just gets me every time.
You're allowed to feel as passionately as you want about these subjects, my friend. It is true that
it just
Ben
made that
and
that
Yoda
much
snaked
worse.
the information.
Yeah.
One in a series of many bad choices made by Obi-Wan.
I mean, to be fair, do you want to look at Luke Skywalker and be like, hey, your dad is like a fascist leader?
Well, yeah, but then he'd have two hands. Maybe he'd have gone anyway.
All right. I'm
ready for some lightning round questions.
Are we ready?
Yeah, we're good. I'm done.
All right.
I'm done.
All right. Let's start somewhere easy. Sig. Based on Empire Strikes Back alone, what character would you want to spend the day with?
The first thing I thought of was Vader, so I guess that's what I'm going with. I've made a choice, and now I have to justify it.
Please, I would like to hear more why you would spend the day with Vader.
Well, it would be short because he'd probably kill me. He he is at his peak entertaining. I mean, he's having a complete freak out about the fact that his son exists. He's
Yes.
planning the world's most awkward dad dinner with
Mm-hmm.
the other child he doesn't know he has. He's in the middle of hanging around Cloud City, setting up this genius plan that he's clearly very proud of. I now have an appreciation for Boba Fett, and he's there. So, I feel like it would be an okay day, all things considered. I could just run errands, and I'm very good at that. I don't. That's all I've got. I've made a bad choice, but Vader was the first person I thought of.
Sig, as long as you don't mess up and you don't have to apologize to him, you're probably going to be alive for the whole day.
I can be efficient in a pinch.
Exactly.
I think I'd make it.
Annie, same question.
I want to hang out with R2 because I've always wanted a droid friend like R2 ever since I was a kid. I wouldn't mind hanging out with 3PO either. I think everybody's way too mean to him, honestly.
Very, very noble responses here. I don't know about you though, Sig. I mean, good luck with that one.
That would be interesting. I'm with you on that. Like, he just found out that Luke Skywalker with his son, to be a fly on that wall, And if you believe the comics,
so.
Yeah. Like, Boba Fett was just like, oh, hey, I got a last name for you. Skywalker.
Yeah.
Chew on that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we could be friends. It turns out he's a lot politer than I initially thought now that I've seen the show. I could offer him a bug and stick it up his nose and, we'd bond.
Yeah.
You could pretend to be a droid. He's also more lenient toward them, I think.
That's true. I should have just gone with R2.
Nope, you got Vader. That's what you get now. Expect him tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
The person that I would spend my day with naturally would be C-3PO. He gets torn apart. He complains. And did anything really happen to him? No. I would like to be a companion to that situation. All right, Annie.
Yes.
Would you rather lose your hand or be indefinitely frozen in carbonite?
I'd rather lose a hand, 100%. But my left hand. If it was my right hand, then just put me in carbonite, I guess.
Sig, you?
I'm going carbonite because it's reversible and it seems to hurt less.
You're saying you don't want a droid modification?
Well, no, because what if it's itchy?
That does pose a problem.
You have a point, because in this galaxy that's far, far away, apparently if you lose a limb, it's fine. You just, get a modification, and there's, absolutely no healing time. You're absolutely fine. You're actually probably, more advanced, or maybe that's the wrong word. You're enhanced. Thank you. Enhanced.
I think for me, I would definitely rather be frozen in carbonite. If anything, I gain a few years of life depending on how long I'm stuck in there. Because, let's say you're frozen, your body's in stasis. Mm-hmm. So, everyone around me could get older, and I'd be like, oh, cool, I'm still, this age.
But what if nobody ever comes to, get you?
I mean, I'm fine with that. Being conscious in the world is sometimes overrated.
Man, that's bleak.
A very bleak episode.
It's Empire Strikes Back. What did you expect?
That's true. It's the dark movie. That's why everybody says it's their favorite. It's darker, and I'm always just like, oh, so.
Final question. This one I'll start with Sig.
Mm-hmm.
In Empire Strikes Back, Yoda is shown to be a terrible cook, creating root leaf stew.
Mm-hmm.
Would you ever eat a meal prepared by Yoda if it meant you could have some Jedi training?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
You would have to eat the whole stew.
Yeah, I could eat a stew. Yeah. It's root leaves though. Like I'm totally okay with plant stuff. Like you can give me a really bland or weird plant soup and I'm fine. If he was like, here's my specialty, it's bull testicles, we might have some questions. But like, and that's the thing people eat. But like, yeah, no, I'm fine with Yoda's cooking. I'll eat bugs. I've eaten bugs. That's fine.
I was going to say there might be some squishy, sluggy type of things given the way Dagobah is.
That's fine. I'll do it. I'll do it for Jedi
You'll
training.
do it for the Jedi training.
It's a good test of Jedi training, I think, because if I have the presence of mind to consume this entire disgusting stew without looking like it's disgusting, then I'm on my way.
Very good answer.
I think the bigger question is, would I survive Yoda teaching me? Because there are other teachers I go to first.
Yeah.
But if it was like a question of, would you rather learn from Yoda
he was my
or
only
Anakin?
Option. Root stew.
Yeah, root stew. Yeah. Same question to you, Annie.
Oh, 100%. Give me the stew. Tell me what.
Give me the stew.
Bring it, Yoda. Teach me.
I think unquestionably we would all eat the stew. I would also eat this disgusting stew that Luke couldn't even stomach if it meant I could be a Jedi.
There we go. That's how low the bar is.
I feel like we have the recipe for root leaf stew somewhere. It's in, is it in the Galaxy's Edge cookbook?
I think it might be in the Galaxy's Edge cookbook.
It's one of the best cookbooks out there, I gotta say.
It really is. All right, that is the end of the episode. Thanks for tuning into the Kyber Collective. If you like what you heard, please give us a like, and if you've got something to say, drop a comment below. Both of these help make us easier to find for other fans and are the best way you can support our work. If you'd like to keep up to date with our episodes, you can subscribe, and you can always talk to us on Twitter at Kyber Collective. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks, and until then, remember, the crystal is the heart of the blade, the heart is the crystal of the Jedi, and the Jedi is the crystal of the Force. The Force is the blade of the heart. All of us are entwined, the crystal, the blade, the Jedi. You are one.